So today I am making an oatmeal sandwich bread, which is like a super soft, it's not like really fluffy like a Wonder Bread loaf, but it's a really good like soft and wholesome sort of hearty sandwich loaf. My kids love it. I love it for peanut butter and jelly. It's just a great winter baking project. So I'm gonna double this loaf today, freeze one, keep the other out on the counter, and I just wanted to show you the recipe. It's great for beginners. It's great if you're looking for something different. It's just a nice basic sandwich recipe. We start with a cup of old-fashioned oats and we pour hot water into them, almost like you're making oatmeal, so that the oats are softened. And then you want to let that mixture, just set it aside and let it cool for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's not like super hot and steamy, because if you put yeast into that, it's going to kill the yeast. So we just want to let it cool down. Warm room temperature is great. It's best if you just kind of forget about it and go along with your day and then come back to it. So I've already done that, and you can see it's, you know, not beautiful, but it's just oats and water. And these are old-fashioned oats. You could, if you like really wanted to, you could use quick cooking oats, the 1 minute Quaker oats, but you cannot use just like an instant oatmeal packet. It's a totally different thing. It's not gonna work. Now we can't do a bread that's just with oats. There's really no gluten in them, not enough. So we need to add some wheat flour in, and we're gonna do that now. So this is a cup of whole wheat flour. You can tweak these. You could do a little bit more whole wheat, a little bit less white. This is 4 cups of just regular white all-purpose flour. Bread flour would be okay too, but you'd need a little bit more liquid. And then I'm gonna do a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and a 1/4 cup of honey. This is a slightly sweet bread. Like I said, it's like the perfect peanut butter and jelly bread and a kid-friendly one, and a lot of that is because of the sweetness. But there's oats in it, so it looks so wholesome. So I'm just gonna throw this in. If you have ever followed any of my bread recipes, you know that I am not finicky at all. I throw everything in all at once and knead it. That's a tablespoon of salt. This is 4.5 teaspoons of instant yeast. If you want to use regular yeast, you too can throw it into your ingredients. I promise you do not need to proof it, mix it with water, or do any other witchcraft. And then this is 3/4 of a stick of butter. This is gonna look dry at first, as you can see. So when you first start mixing this, it's gonna look a little tiny bit dry, but do not add any liquid at this stage. The butter is gonna soften, the honey is gonna mix in there. We might actually end up needing to add a little bit more flour to this. For now it looks okay, but just give it a few minutes to mix in before you make any decisions about adding anything or anything like that. So before you go ahead and let this machine knead and knead and knead and knead, I want you to check the consistency. Anytime you're making bread, in the mixer, by hand, by machine, whatever, don't just let the kneading process begin without you coming in to see. So what we're looking for here is something that is soft. There should be no dry bits. It shouldn't be batter. It should be like a true dough. I feel like this is a little tiny bit wet with how sticky it is. So I'm going to let this go for about a minute with the expectation that I'm probably gonna need to add like 2 tablespoons of flour. So one good thing about this is it's still like easy to handle. It sticks slightly to my hands, but it's definitely not a batter. But I would prefer it if when I were to touch this dough that it did not really stick to my hands at all. So that is why I'm gonna put a little bit more flour in. And this is a normal thing. Like, you can measure your bread in grams and be a mad scientist about it, and you're still gonna need to tweak things along the way. So that is why I recommend that you just stay calm about it, don't get hysterical about exact measurements, and just learn to read your dough and tweak it a little bit, because you have to do it no matter what. If you have a mixer like this, it does a great job with a doubled loaf of bread. In fact, it does better with a doubled loaf than a single loaf. So take advantage of that and use it so that you don't have to spend so much time in the kitchen. But if you have a KitchenAid mixer, I recommend just doing 1 batch at a time. My truly favorite, so like I am happy, like let me take a clean hand and I'll show you that I can touch it. It's slightly sticky, but it's not sticking to my hand, and that's the difference. My favorite way to make bread dough is just in the bread machine on the dough cycle. But this, if you're doubling it, this is a great way to go. So I'm gonna let this knead. I'm gonna let the machine run for about 3 minutes. This one's super powerful. KitchenAid's gonna take more like 10. You can knead this by hand, absolutely, but it's gonna take like 15 minutes of just kneading on your countertop, which I find very tedious, and even worse, I feel like people rush through it because it's so annoying. They just wanna be done. They don't need it long enough. This machine, I'm gonna run it for 3 minutes and we will come back and check on it then. Okay, so how do we know when the dough has been kneaded enough? And there is one way to tell that never fails. And it will make you mad sometimes because you feel like you should be seeing what you want to see and you don't. Let me explain. It's called the window pane test. And the idea is you get a small amount of dough like this, and then we're gonna stretch it out. And what we're looking for is an area in this dough where it becomes translucent. So as I stretch, it's tearing before it can get to that translucent. So you can see a little tiny bit there, it's translucent, but more than that, it's tearing. It's really close. Like I am getting some translucent spots. This is never gonna be as dramatic of a window pane as some other recipes because of the oats, but I'm gonna give this 1 to 2 more minutes and I think we will be even closer. This makes a huge difference. If your dough is under kneaded, it's always gonna come out dense and you're always gonna think you don't know how to bake bread or that there's something wrong with your recipe. That's not the problem. The problem is you've under kneaded it. A lot of people will think they have over kneaded it, but that is virtually impossible. It is so rare to over knead a dough. It's like people who say they can't lose weight because they don't eat enough. It is very, very unusual. This to me, I feel good about. Let's check it. Stretch. And so I'm seeing these translucent areas. Yes, it is eventually tearing, but this is good enough for me. Seeing any amount of translucent areas, this smooth dough, I like it, and moving on. While this was kneading, I washed out the bowl that we mixed everything in because I just don't want a ton of bowls at the end. And I'm gonna transfer it back into here to rise. I always like to rise my dough in the oven, but you turn it on, don't have it on while it's sitting in there. Just turn it on super short for like a minute until it's warm, not hot, just warm. Then turn it off and then put your dough in there to rise. This is probably gonna take about an hour, but I like to check it at around 35, 45 minutes, just depends. You do not need to get hysterical about shaping this into a ball. The whole idea is we're just throwing it in the bowl. I spray the bowl with Pam so it's easier to get out, but you don't really have to at this stage. I'm gonna take all of this dough out. And you do need to cover this while it's rising so it doesn't dry out. You could do a damp tea towel. I'm gonna do just some sprayed plastic wrap here because I'm gonna need that plastic wrap to cover the loaves after we shape it, so I might as well just get it out now. So what I'm gonna do is 2 things of plastic wrap and then I'll reuse them for the loaf. So I wanna make sure they're both sprayed. Whee! There's one. And then I'm gonna overlap it with another. I'm gonna pop this in my oven, which is again, warm, off, not hot. And we'll be back here in an hour to shape the loaf and finish it up. Okay, so it's been an hour. This has risen quite a bit. It's really soft, it's very smooth, and I'm gonna go ahead and shape this into a sandwich loaf. So sometimes, if I'm being very particular, I will weigh out the halves to make sure that they're exactly even loaves, but I'm not gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna cut this. When you're shaping a sandwich loaf, it is really easy to get overwhelmed and feel like this is just too hard, but it's really not. The first step is just to stretch everything out into a rectangle. Doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle at all. You just want to use your loaf pan as sort of a guideline. You want the short side to be about as long as the long side of your loaf pan. You'll see why in a sec. So then you want to remember shoulders in, head down. So we're just going to tuck this in. These are the shoulders, and then the head comes down, and then we're rolling up. And I know it's a little lumpy. It's not beautiful looking at the moment. That is okay. And then remember this that we had from before. cover it again. The first rise in bread is always longer than the second. I don't really know why, maybe because we divided it and so it's faster. So don't leave this an hour without checking it. What I'm gonna do is put this back. I'm gonna like rewarm my oven, pop this in again, and at 30 minutes, I'm gonna check it. I don't think it's gonna be quite done at 30 minutes, but I'm gonna take it out of the oven, preheat the oven for baking without this inside. That would be a disaster. So I'm gonna set my timer for 30 minutes just so I know that's when I'm coming back and doing the next thing. So these are finished rising. This did end up taking about 1 hour in my oven, slightly warm but turned off. And for the next step, this is totally optional, and this is just for looks. I'm gonna brush these with an egg wash that's a mix of 1 egg white and like a tablespoon or so of water. You could also do just water or just egg white, and it's just gonna give them a shine without making it too dark. You also could just brush these with flour, but I like to put oats on these, and you need some type of like liquid to help them stick. So if you just wanna keep it super cheap, just do water and then press the oats on top. But I added an egg white here just for a little bit of shine. The reason I'm not doing a full egg with the yolk is that will make it look really, really brown and shiny, and that's just not the look I'm going for. So now I have some of extra oats. I'm gonna sprinkle these on pretty heavily. Ending up using about, say, over a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons per loaf. And so our next step is to bake these. I preheated the oven already to 350. I'm gonna let these bake for about 35 minutes before I check them. I really like to check the temperature of bread when I'm baking it. I want it around 190. But if you don't have a thermometer, or if that just seems like a pain, the best way that I think is does the pan feel light for its size? Because that means all the moisture has been baked out of it. Like when you pick this up, you have a good sense of how heavy it is. When it's fully baked, when you pick it up, it should be so light, because really you're just holding like a couple cups of flour. That's the best way to tell. Or you can just, stick a toothpick in there and see. But I'm gonna pop these in. I'll be back in 35 minutes and we'll let them cool. We're almost done. So these took about 37 minutes in the oven, and they came out super beautiful. They're really brown with a really pretty oats on top. They just look so nice. So what I'm gonna do is just get these on a cooling rack, let them cool for about an hour at least. You can start slicing it after about an hour of cooling, but if you wanna slice and freeze it, give it a little bit more time, like 2 hours. You want it totally cool. I am not into like freezer cooking or anything like that, but whenever you get the chance to double a recipe and then freeze it, that is when you're actually like really saving time. Like I've never understood the whole concept of like a random Sunday morning, you're gonna make a lasagna and then put it in the freezer for the future. But what does make sense to me is if you're making a lasagna anyway, make 2 and then you have one for the future. And so this is just that same idea. And with bread, it is truly like no more work to make 2 versus 1. Bread is just one of those things, like rolls, I get that that's a little more work to shape them, but a sandwich loaf, it is so quick and easy to shape that the hardest part is taking out your stand mixer, taking out the ingredients, fiddling with the oven, and you're only doing that one time and you're getting 2 loaves. I'm just gonna really gently remove this. If this happens to you, don't be alarmed. It shouldn't. I should have probably done a little bit more PM, and more importantly, gotten these out of the pan right away. But these will be fine. Just use a knife. There's usually like one little sticky spot, and if you can release that, you'll be better off. Okay, crisis averted. And when this happens, what's funny is sometimes it won't look beautiful from the outside. This looks okay, but if it looks like it all messed up from the outside, by the time you slice it, the slices themselves still look lovely. Move this out of the way. We're losing a lot of oats. That's okay, we still have plenty on top of the loaf, and they look super pretty. So I'm gonna really carefully run this alongside. Something my dog doesn't like out there. And then this should pop out a lot easier. There we go. Okay, so I'm I'm gonna let these cool. I think I will slice it for you at the very end. But this is just a great recipe to have up your sleeve, especially if you're just tired of like the same old white sandwich loaf, which happens to me. But you also, if you're like me, don't love like whole grain or anything like that. So this is just a little variety. It's pretty, it's still really wholesome. It is perfect for packing sandwiches, and it's just kind of a fun and satisfying, pretty project to do on a winter day. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'm gonna leave all of the ingredients and everything in the description box, and then I'll also put a link to my blog post where you can go there and like do a print version if that's easier for you. Either way, whatever. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck baking. I hope you make this. Bye.